This weekend I've mainly been doing some gardening stuff actually, but I have been doing a little bit on the cars. The MGB, I have now fixed the alternator. I don't know if it was the regulator or just that the brushes had been got too worn down, but the repair kit came with both, so I just replaced both and that fixed the problem. So that's going again. Needs to go for its warrant of fitness next week. And the Riley, you'll note the magneto is off again, so that's off being tweaked, just adjusted so that the range is correct, hopefully. And I've actually now talked to the certifier, who I was hoping would be able to come and visit me, so he could look at the Austin and the Riley at the same time. But he's too busy, and this is a problem with a lot of the certifiers, I think, is there aren't that many of them, and they've got an awful lot of work to do. So I can take the car up to see him, and my neighbour across the road has very kindly offered to help with that. I don't have a trailer. Obviously, I've got the Land Rover there, which I could pull a trailer with, but I'm not that experienced with towing trailers, and I'd rather not do that by myself with my expensive, unfinished vintage car. So my neighbour's very kindly offered to help. The good thing is he has worked with the certifier before. He recently had his son's car certified. It's a modified MX-5, and he said, yeah, he was fine. He was quite helpful trying to get that car on the road. So we are going to have to find out exactly how this needs to go through, and this is where it's going to get interesting. He's going to talk to the head office and find out what the story is there. But I've been making it ready to travel, which basically just means making sure everything is actually bolted on. Surprisingly, quite a few bits weren't. So, for example, the engine wasn't actually bolted in, it's just sitting on its mount. So I've put the nuts on the end of the bolts there, so the engine won't move. I've gone over everything else. All of the sort of castle nuts, I've actually put temporary split pins through, just so that there's no danger of anything shaking loose and falling off on the way up there. So the car is pretty much ready to travel, I think. There were a few other things I hadn't actually finished yet, like making sure the shock absorber mounts were actually bolted up tight. Obviously, everything is going to have to come undone again at some point. That's why I've just used cheap split pins on it all. But I do want everything actually in place so you can see what it's like. And with everything bolted up tight, it's amazing how stiff the springs are here. So if I stand right on the back of the chassis, I can barely move it. I mean, jumping up and down, I can make it move, but my weight on the back of it doesn't make the springs move much at all. And I think that's just the nature of these cars. Very stiff springs, very flexible chassis. And that's part of the feel of them, is the way they sort of move as you're driving them, the way they flex and they move around. And I'm going to have to take that into account when I build the body. So next thing to do on this, I'm going to give it another check before it goes on the trailer. I'm not sure what day we're going to do that. I'll have to take a day off work, which is a bit annoying, but it's important to get this done, I think, or start getting this done. But I have bolted the diff cover on. I need to go back inside to remember exactly how much oil needs to go in there, but that should be all ready to fill up with oil. There's no oil in the gearbox, just a little bit in the bottom just to keep it lubricated, but I'll probably not fill that up yet until I actually need to drive it anywhere or test the gearbox. The diff I want full of oil because we have to roll it onto the trailer, so I don't want that running dry. You can see I've got my cardboard drip tray underneath there after I do it, just to make sure nothing's leaking. It's bound to leak somewhere. Still no leaks from the engine yet, which is good to see. The other thing I did, nobody will remember this because it was ages and ages ago, but this diff cover had a bit of a crack down the bottom mounting hole, and I had welded all of that up. Had a much more luck welding that cover than I had on the intake manifold. But a trick I learned is You can use this Loctite 638. 638 is the wicking grade Loctite, but one of the other actually official uses of this stuff is to seal up porous castings. So what you do is you heat it up to a specific temperature. It's strangely specific. I think it's 121 degrees C. And then you let it cool down to 85 C, and you basically squirt in some of the Loctite. And that'll wick into any little pores or gaps in the casting and hopefully seal it up. So I've done that, which is why I've got my temperature probe out. The top of my bottle actually broke, but what I've discovered is these little cheap plastic pipette things work really well for keeping the Loctite in. So that'll live quite happily in there because it's open to the air, so it won't set. But that makes it really easy to put drops of this Loctite where you need it. And like I say, this is actually an official use of this stuff. It's in the data sheets for it. It explains how to do it. So I did that just in case the casting there is porous. I have also wicked some of that stuff around some of the oil fittings around the external oil filter just to make sure it wicks down in there and doesn't leak around some of those. The other thing I need to start doing is, obviously I'm taking that to the certifier to make sure we have got a path forwards, and then I can start working on the body. Well, to be honest, even if there isn't a path forwards, I'm going to start working on the body and figure all that out later. But bodywork's going to be interesting. So how you actually do it isn't really very well explained anywhere. Apparently it's kind of one of these lost arts, and before it was lost, it was fairly secret by the sounds of it. So I've been buying various books to help me. This isn't about bodywork, but this is a book I got recently, which is fascinating. It just goes through all the years at Brooklands and what was happening there and what people were doing and that kind of thing. There are a few pictures of Riley's in here. I haven't gone through it all completely yet because it's very dense text. So I think I'm up to about chapter 2 at the moment. Great book though. And I have been buying some woodworking books. So I first got this book about wooden frame bodies. I actually posted this on the Austin 7 forum just to see if anyone could give me some hints for some books that would explain what you're supposed to do. And I've got a few. I've got them all on watch lists and things, looking out for them, but this is one I was able to get. And it's a pretty book, but to be honest, it's not much use. It has the photos may be interesting, but it's like the text is just kind of waffly and filling in the gaps. It doesn't necessarily say a lot. And then it's got a lot of talking to people in the industry who do things and just getting their opinions on things, which all seem to vary. So apart from some really basic sort of hints in here, I haven't found it that much use. So, for example, there's a lot about restoring existing cars, and there is a chapter here on, so we go from shooting brakes, this is about building them, there's a little bit about bolting them together, they talk quite a bit about gluing and screwing the joints. This is the section on how to build coach-built cars, and it really isn't that much use. So, you know, some of the stuff is really pretty obvious. So using curved templates to check that you've got the body shape right. Well, you know, I could figure that out for myself without a book, to be honest. So it doesn't go into any of the actual how you do the joints or, you know, how you bolt it to the chassis or anything like that. So, yeah, a bit of a shame. And then that's only one tiny chapter in the book. So, you know, it doesn't really help. The photos are useful. I can sort of look at the photos and see how things are done. And then there's a whole lot of stuff about different sorts of cars. But again, it's just quite sort of vague. You know, I think that chapter on wood graining is bigger than the chapter on how to build a coach-built car. So anyway, it's interesting but not that useful. And then I had to buy this book because I don't really know much about woodworking. My major woodworking projects so far are a wooden TARDIS made out of MDF and a Rimu coffee table with a model railway inside it, both of which aren't that complex. So I'm not a woodworker, but I got this book, and this book is actually really, really good. It actually reminds me of the sort of books I used to love as a kid, where there's lots of pictures, lots of descriptions of things, and it's very practical. And I think this is more the sort of book that's going to help me. It talks about the sort of tools you need, and it's not a huge amount. It tells you about various bits and pieces. Yeah, it's a surprisingly useful book. I suspect any real woodworkers will just be laughing at this point because this is all like, really basic stuff. But looking at the pictures of the cars and how they're done, I don't think it's that complicated. I mean, it's not going to be easy, but I don't know. We'll see. So I've got that. And then I started going through my rather pathetic collection of woodworking tools, which seems to consist of 4 chisels, a spoke shave that Joss gave me. It was all rusty. I've just cleaned it up. Steel rule and a number 4 plane. I have ordered a few other little bits and pieces, just some marking out tools and things like that. The main thing I've bought is actually a kit so that I can sharpen these tools because they're not sharp at all. And then, of course, the other thing I've got is, well, whatever metalworking tools I've got already. I do have a router, which will be useful, and my bandsaw, which I think needs a new blade, but again, I need to know how many teeth per inch would be suitable for cutting the sort of timber I need to make the car from. And timber-wise, I think I'm going to go with American ash because I know I can get it. It's not that, well, it is expensive, but it's not one of the most expensive timbers. There are way more expensive timbers than that. And that's a well-known traditional material to use. So I guess I have to figure out how big the sort of pieces I'm likely to be cutting are and then figure out the number of teeth from that. Originally I was looking at getting a bimetal type blade for this so I could cut steel and things on it as well, but I've got other ways of cutting steel, so I think I will just stick with a woodworking blade for this and just use it for that. So yeah, I've obviously got an awful lot to learn. I think one of the first things I'll have to do is look through all my pictures I've got of Brooklands and actually start sketching out what bits of body there are. What do I actually need to make? And the sizes and the things like that. And then I can start looking at details about, well, how were these joints made and what steel bracing is involved? Because I know there are steel brackets involved in various places. Obviously, I can make all of those myself. I just need to know what they are. So it's going to get interesting. This whole car will have to come apart again, obviously. There'll be a ton of stuff that still needs to be drilled, holes drilled in the chassis. There's the whole under tray that needs to go underneath the thing. So, basically this has just got a flat bottom all the way along. I've seen various ones, but some of them, go right to the back of the tail. And of course, the back of the tail is going to be out here somewhere. You can sort of see the taper on the chassis rails there, so the tail will just follow in naturally from those to wherever the natural point is. And I have got side views, which I have put into my CAD software, which is interesting because I can overlay them and see where the variances and things are. So I don't know if there's an exact Brooklands body. These were all factory made, raced, crashed, rebuilt. So I need to get something that's pretty close, so I'll have to look through all my photos and figure out what the most normal Brooklyn style body is. There were door and doorless styled bodies. I'm going to go with doors because otherwise it's going to be impossible to get in and out of. Yeah, and I think I'll just keep playing in my CAD software and figuring out exactly how I'm going to do it. When it comes to actually building it, I think what I'll probably do is build a practice one. So I don't know if I'll use something like MDF or pine or just some cheap wood, just to get practice at woodworking and to start making the shapes, and maybe I can use those as templates when it comes to doing it with the proper expensive timber. But I think that's basically where I'm at today. Just so we can see my total lack of experience with woodworking. This is the dining table I made. Basically got an old table that had a cracked top, reused the legs, cut down the bits of the top that weren't cracked to make the sides, and used, these are remove floorboards, tongue and groove, so that the glass is sitting on the tongue, and I sort of routed around the outside and just bolted on a steel strip, effectively in the groove. So that was one little woodworking project. We'll have a look at the other one as well. And this is my only other really big woodworking project. I've made smaller things before, little boxes and some of my gadgets and things like that. But yeah, the TARDIS was all just made from MDF and a circular saw, basically. And it's all just glued and bolted together from that. It all comes apart, so it's movable. It's 3/4 scale, because otherwise it's actually quite tall. You don't realize how big the real TARDIS is. So, like I say, this is all just MDF, dead simple. So, yeah, building a car is going to be, I think, a little bit trickier.